We're going to be diving into John chapter 6. John chapter 6. Let's dig in right now, verse 5. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Philip, he asked, "Where can we buy bread to feed all of these people?" He was testing Philip because he already knew what he was going to do. And Philip replied, "Even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them." And then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up and he said, "Hey, there's a young boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good is it in this huge crowd? Tell everyone to sit down," Jesus said. And so they all sat down on the grassy slopes. The men alone numbered 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves and he gave thanks to God and he distributed them among the people. And afterward, he did the same with the fish. And they ate as much as they wanted. And after everyone was full, Jesus told his disciples, "Now gather the leftovers so that nothing is wasted." And so they picked up the pieces and filled 12 baskets with scraps left by the people who had eaten them from the 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. So there are several things that we could focus in on in this portion of Scripture if we wanted to. We could focus on the fact that Jesus, even in the midst of a situation that looks like too much, that most of us would get overwhelmed in, has a plan. Always has a plan. And he knows the plan, even though he asks us what the plan might be able to be to see where our faith is. He already knows the plan. And Jesus' plan, everybody, is always to take what appears to look like death and make it life. And make it life in an abundant way. Even when he comes through in a way that we don't feel like he should have come through in, it's a way that is always going to provide more than enough life. We might be mourning, we might have a difficult time with the outcome of the situation, but Jesus always comes through in a way that multiplies life because he takes what the enemy will mean for harm and he uses it for his glory. He already knows the way. Last week we talked about how one of God's names is Jehovah Jireh, the God who sees in advance and makes a way. He knew what he was going to do, and he knew that he was going to multiply that situation. That's what he does. He's a God of multiplication. While we could talk about all those things, we're not going to talk about those things. God is always, 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 always good. Here's what I want to talk to you about today, if I can, for the next few minutes. I want to talk to you about influence. Let me say influence. I want to talk to you about the boy whose lunch began the miracle for these 5,000 men, which Bible scholars also tell us it could have been up to 20,000 people, including the women and the children. And I don't technically want to talk about the boy. I want to talk about the influencer behind the boy. I want to talk about whose influence the boy was under. See, we don't actually know. The Bible doesn't tell us whose influence the boy was actually under. We know that Jesus used the boy's lunch. We don't know if he took it from him or if he offered it up or whatever the case may be. But knowing about Jesus, what we know about Jesus, we would assume that he didn't take the boy's lunch, right? We could assume that he didn't, back him into a corner and say, give me those fish and those loaves of bread, right? We can assume that Jesus didn't do that. So what do we assume? We assume that, somehow, some way, there was an influence in this boy's life that caused him to move in a way that would provide for others. So we don't know whose influence the boy was under. We don't know if it was his mother. We don't know if it was his father. We don't know if it was a grandparent. We don't know if it was a city kids leader. We don't know if it was a pastor. I mean, it could have been a teacher from school. It could have been, we don't know whose influence he was under. And we also don't actually know what the influencer taught him. We don't know if it was his mom, what he was taught. We don't know if his dad, what he was actually taught. We don't know the methods that they used. We don't know the tone that they presented it in. We don't know the heart behind it. We don't know the principles. We don't even know the intention of it. And so you might be asking yourself, Pastor Matt, what do you actually know? We don't know much. But just by the fact that this boy gave his lunch lets us in on a couple of little things. And then those are the things that we're going to focus on today. So here they are, the few things that we do know about the influencer of the boy who fed 5,000. Number one, we know that they trained him. We know that they trained him. It was obvious that he was trained in some way, shape, or form. The Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, it says this, to direct your children onto the right path, and when they're older, they will not leave it. We know that they trained him. Whoever the influencer was, whoever's influence this boy was under, we know that they trained him. We know that they did not shirk their responsibility and wait for someone else to train him. We know that they trained him. I would assume that they took a hands-on approach, not a hands-off approach. There's a lot of cultural noise that lets us know or tells us or tries to encourage us to parent or to lead or to pastor or to teach with a hands-off approach. Can I encourage you? We need to get our hands on our kids. We need to get our hands on the future generations. We need to put our hands on them. Maybe it's just on a shoulder to direct them and to, just encourage them in a way that they should go. Can I tell you something? There is no 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 10-year-old that should be making their own decisions in this season of their lives. We need to train them in the way that they should go. Parents, we need to remember that we are the parents and they are not. I can tell you that this boy's life evidenced the fact that he was trained. Somebody had their hands on his life, molding him and shaping him into who he was supposed to become. They didn't say, well, we'll see what happens. They said, well, let's create by the Spirit of God what happens. Do you hear what I'm saying, everybody? It was obvious that he was trained. How do I know that? Because people are not naturally wired to share. Why do you think from the earliest age, the number one thing that you have to teach your kids or kids that are in your life is to share, right? No, we share. I can't tell you how many times as parents, our kids are fantastic, but they still don't want to share. We've got to encourage them to share. We've got to make them share. We've got to set up opportunities for them to share. And even then, we have to do more so that they will share. I was at a birthday party a couple of months ago, and the older sibling of the birthday child grabbed the toy that the birthday child had gotten, and they were playing, and the birthday child flipped out. And the parent was like, hey, you need to share. We share in our family. They didn't say, oh, well, duke it out, figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Why? Because we are to take a hands-on approach and encourage our kids in the way that they should go so that when they're older, they won't depart from it. How did this boy just show up to a party, didn't realize it was a dinner party, didn't also realize he was the only one that had anything to offer at the dinner party, and decide, I'm going to share? Somebody somewhere had to influence him in a way of sharing. They trained him. He was trained. See, good behavior, obedient behavior, the type of behavior that would encourage sharing does not fall out of the sky, and it certainly doesn't come easy. You don't tell your kid one time to share, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to share everything. No. We got 18-year-olds who just graduated high school, and we still have to encourage them to share. We got adults that are a part of our church that we still have to encourage to share. It is not built on the inside of us to share. That's why so many of us, even those of us who track with Jesus, have a difficult time bringing our tithe because it's our money and we don't like to share. Somebody somewhere along the way influenced this young man in the way that they should go. Sharing is difficult, and it doesn't come easy. It takes intentionality in all seasons and all phases of our lives because people don't like to give their stuff away. We know that this young man was trained in a certain way. Let's be people, everybody, who commit to training future generations that are coming after us. Let's be people who train young people. Let's be people who don't say, well, that's not my, we don't want to be people who say, well, that's not my responsibility. No, it is your responsibility. If you're complaining about it, then it's your responsibility to help train them in it. Oh, the millennials or the Gen Z or Gen X or Gen whatever is coming next. Who cares? Let's hush our mouths and let's commit to training them instead of complaining about them. I had a mentor tell me a long time ago, Matt, you can't blame people. You got to train people. Stop complaining and start training. Well, who am I? What do I know? Just be consistent in something. You don't have to know anything. Just show up and just be present. And the Holy Spirit will show you what you need to do. The second thing that we know is that he was equipped. So those influencers, whoever they may be, they equipped him. They equipped him. Whether they put the bread and fish in his hands or not, we don't really know. Maybe they gave him money to purchase it. Maybe they hooked him up with the gear or the tools that he could catch the fish or make the bread. We don't actually know. All we know is that in his possession, he had 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he was ready when the opportunity came because somebody equipped him. Some of us might be thinking, I don't think so. He was just in the right place at the right time because, that's what happens. I'm behind this person because they were in the right place at the right time and I wasn't in the right place at the right time. No, listen, what happened was this. Here's what happened. He was in the same place as thousands of other people. Just like you're in the same place as thousands of other people. You're in the same world, the same time, have the same opportunities as everybody else. Here's the difference between him and everybody else. Somebody had equipped him with what was needed in the moment, and they trained him to be prepared to give it when the time was right. Y'all hear what I'm saying? Here's what happens with us. Here's what happens with people that we're leading oftentimes, is we don't actually equip them to have in their hands the right thing at the right time so that when they are in the right place, they can actually cash in on the opportunity. Y'all hear what I'm saying? And so what we've got to do is we've got to look what's in our hands. What have we been equipped with? Now, what can we put in the hands of our children, of our grandchildren, of the young people that we're mentoring? Maybe you don't have children. Maybe you don't have grandchildren. Who are you mentoring? Who is coming behind you? You should never stop. As long as you're breathing breath on this people planet, you should be mentoring somebody. You should find somebody who wants to know what you know. And you might say, nobody wants to know what I want to know. Yes, they do. I guarantee you there's somebody within your sphere of influence that longs to know what you know. What would happen if you just took time to equip them with what you had? People say all the time, man, our world's going to hell in a handbasket. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm afraid for future generations. Then why don't you start training future generations? Why don't you start imparting in them? Why don't you start equipping them? Come on, find somebody. Find somebody. If you're an employer, hire somebody. If you're an employee, see who's around that you can train. If you're retired, do you have a neighbor? Can you find yourself somewhere in town, hanging around, not in a creepy way, but a school? Like, what can you do? Somebody wants to know what you know. Stop selling yourself short. God's not done with you. You've got something that it can equip a future generation. Somebody had obviously put some tools in this young man's hands. They allowed him the opportunity to be prepared for an opportunity. And this is the only thing I think as older folks that we can hope for. I hope that my kids are prepared, that they're equipped with the tools to be able to produce something so that when there's a need, they can draw on their training and say, I can share this. 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 That's all we can hope for our kids, isn't it? We can hope for our grandkids or the people that we mentor. That they'll be provided for, that they'll be equipped, and that they'll have the proper training to draw on. I fully believe that opportunity favors the prepared. And I think oftentimes we miss opportunity because we're not prepared for the opportunity. It's our responsibility as people who have influence, who have resources, to inspire others, to equip others coming behind us to be ready for those opportunities. Let's be people who are equipping the generations that are coming after us. The third thing that I think that we can see is this: they encouraged him. Whoever was influencing him, whoever's influence this boy was under, they encouraged him. So they trained him, they equipped him, but they encouraged him. They obviously encouraged him in his behavior. They encouraged him in obedience. They encouraged him in generosity according to the training that they'd given him. People in general, but specifically kids, will emulate the behaviors that are celebrated in them. They will. They will emulate the behaviors that are celebrated in them. But the behaviors that are encouraged or given attention to, both good and bad, what you celebrate, you will recreate time and time again on the inside of them. Let me say this another way. Whatever you give attention to is what you'll see more and more of over and over and over again. Okay? Whatever you give attention to, you'll see more and more and more and more of. Now, you got to give the proper attention in the proper way at the proper time. Some of us think that, well, we don't want to give attention to bad behavior then because we don't want to cultivate bad behavior. No, you need to give the proper attention to the bad behavior so that you don't cultivate it. You still have to get your hands on a situation to help train and lead and guide. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? Yeah. But we want to celebrate the type of behavior that we want to see more of, and we want to really put a kibosh on the type of behavior that we don't want to see any more of, okay? And so, for instance, you guys, if my child, Eli, can you stand up, please? Can you just stand up? This Eli, he's my favorite boy twin. Of all of my children, he's my favorite boy twin. But, so you can see Eli now, right? Okay, good. Eli, have a seat. So let's just pretend Eli is 4 again, that he is just as cute as can be. You saw how handsome he is right now. As a 4-year-old, he was the cutest little chubby cheek. Like you just squeeze him like I just love you, little kid ever in the world. Ever. But if Eli was throwing a fit at 4 years old, I didn't give him an iPad to settle him down. Because if I did, what he would know is that if he throws a fit, Dad will give him an iPad. You cultivate what you give attention to. Y'all hear what I'm saying? And so he knows that if he can act out, or if he goes to children's church and he punches his teacher in the face, and I take him out to give him, to get a lollipop and have a conversation, guess what he's going to do next week? He's going to punch his teacher in the face because he knows that dad will take him to get a lollipop and have a conversation. You cultivate the behaviors that you give your attention to. You got to give the right attention to the right behaviors in training them in the way that they should go. Eli, did you ever get a lollipop for the time you punched your teacher in the face? No. No. But that's why now at 18, I can trust him with everything. There's nothing in my world that I don't trust my kids with because my wife and I chose to train them, not according to the culture, but according to the Bible. There's nothing that I don't trust them with that's appropriate for an 18-year-old. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? Because there are still things that I have and have access to that are not appropriate for an 18-year-old. So what do they have to do? They've got to grow and mature into them, right? It's our responsibility to encourage the type of behavior that we want to continue to see. Well, Pastor Matt, are you talking about behavior modification? No, I'm absolutely not. What we want to do is we want to encourage obedience. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? Obedience. And as leaders, people who influence, maybe you don't, maybe again, you don't have children or your grandchildren. That's different. It looks a little bit different in that influence. What do you want to do? You want to encourage obedience. Now, is it only so that they will obey your voice? No, absolutely not. It's so that they will obey the voice of God ultimately. Yes. We want to be people who obey God's voice, right? Do you know why I can trust my kids with anything? Because I know that first and foremost, they obviously love my wife and I, but they love God more than they love us. They want to be obedient to God's voice before they want to be obedient to our voice. And they were trained in that over the years. So I know that no matter what we give them, no matter what we offer them, they will seek to hear God's voice above everything else. That's what we want to be training people in. When we're serving in the kids ministry, we want to be teaching them obedience to the voice of God. When we've got our grandkids at our house, we want to be teaching them obedience to the voice of God. Our children that we have the opportunity to steward and to parent, we want to be teaching them obedience to the voice of God. The kids that we're teaching in our classroom, we want to teach them obedience. Now, we can't get overtly Christian in the classroom, but we can teach them that there is a God that created them, that we want to help them be obedient to. We can do that stuff, you guys. We don't have to be handcuffed to what we can and can't do. Culture's got teachers all over the country scared to say the name of Jesus or talk about the things of God. And we've seen it with our own eyes, the influence that's open for teachers who are standing for the good news of the gospel of Jesus. We've seen it take place. We've seen it happen. And we've seen public schools start coming to us, knocking our doors down, asking us to continue to influence them. And we say, yes, 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 because we are encouraging the type of behavior that we want to see. And we're doing it unashamedly for Jesus. Can I tell you something as an influencer, a person who has influence? Hope is not a strategy. Well, I hope they'll get it. I hope that someday it'll happen. Hope is not a strategy, and we can't live only with hope that our kids will get it. They won't get it. We've got to train them. We've got to equip them. We've got to encourage them. It's our responsibility. It's a common misconception that, you know what? When they get into the situation, they'll rise to the occasion. People do not ever rise to the occasion. They always fall to the level of their training. You can hope all you want, but your kids will never rise to the occasion. You can hope all you want, but you'll never rise to the occasion. You'll always fall to your level of training. So how are you being trained, and how are you training those that are coming behind you? We've got to train them in the ways of God. Let's be people who are going to encourage godly behavior, obedience to the voice of God. in us and the generations to follow. And the fourth and final thing is this. We can see or assume or know that whoever influenced him empowered him. They empowered him. They empowered him to make his own decisions. And I got into this a little bit early. But because I trained our kids, because we've trained the staff, because we've trained volunteers around here, because we've trained kids team around here, because we've trained people, because we've encouraged people, because we've equipped people, they can be empowered to make the decisions that need to be made. Our twins, Eli and Emery, they have the ability to make decisions on our behalf and then tell us about them afterwards. The staff have decisions, or have the ability to make decisions on our behalf and talk to us about them afterwards. Why? Because we've trained them. They've been equipped. They've been encouraged. And now they're empowered. This little boy had his lunch, 5 loaves and 2 fish. I'm sure he was taking it somewhere. He had a responsibility to take it somewhere, to accomplish something with that. Maybe he was taking it home to feed his brothers and sisters, or maybe he went into town and he was coming back out to meet his parents in the crowd. And he had enough for the family. But apparently, someone somewhere along the way who influenced his life they trained him. They equipped him. They encouraged him. And now they empowered him. He's walking in the crowd to find his parents, perhaps. We got dinner. And he gets stopped by the disciples. And they said, brother, what you got there? 5 loaves and 2 fish? Just enough to feed my family. I know you might not know this Jesus guy, but Jesus is asking us to gather anything in the crowd that we can find. And something on the inside of this kid, he didn't rise to the occasion. He fell to the level of his training. He didn't suddenly feel this overwhelming sense of power. He had been released power from those who influenced him. He said, okay, take it. See what we can do. And Jesus took the little bit that he had that was maybe meant to feed his family alone. And not only did he feed the 5,000 men, the perhaps 20,000 men, women, and children, there were 12 baskets of leftovers. All from a kid who had a lunch, but had obviously been trained, equipped, encouraged, and now empowered to make a decision. Don't ever underestimate the power of your voice in somebody's life. See, it might not matter to you in this season, but I wonder if what you're equipping somebody else with will matter to somebody else in another season. See, you think that your life is just small, and it might be. But that voice that you have in one person's life could equip them and empower them, encourage them to make a difference in thousands of people's lives in the future. Don't underestimate where you're at currently in this stage or phase of life. You've got influence. You've got the power to influence. You've got the ability to influence. People, young people specifically, want to hear your voice. They want your hand on their shoulder. They want your arm around their neck. They want you in their lives. They don't want you to pretend that they don't exist. They don't want you to let them just be on their phones. They don't want you to let them just go do whatever they want. They want you to invest in them. They want you to be a part of their world. They want your voice in their world. I promise you, they do. They do. They want your voice. Not so you can be hard-nosed and controlling, but so that you can be open-handed, equipping and providing opportunity, coming alongside and saying, you know what, whatever you choose, according to the plan of God, I believe is going to be done unto you. I'm going to come alongside you. I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. They don't want you to nag them. They don't need you to nag them. They need you to get with God and to get with them, to get together with God. So what's the next step? Where are we going from here? We've got an incredible opportunity right here in front of us. Some of you in this room, you thought, no, I'm not called to youth. I'm not called to kids. I'm not called to any of this stuff. And I'm here to tell you, if you like this church, you like youth ministry. If you like this church, you like kids ministry. Because this is all we do. Surprise! If you think for a second that God created your life to end when you die, then you don't know the God that created you. You're supposed to live on for generations to come. Your legacy lasting by the covenant God created with you. Because family matters to God. You believe that?